Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana episode. In this video, I am creating clean and simple birthday cards using just a single candle stamp along with some sentiments, and I'm also playing with the Olo markers. All supplies I'm using in this video are listed and linked in the video description below. I never seem to have enough birthday cards on hand, so I tend to make a lot of them. And I know I made birthday cards in my previous Yippee For Yana, but there we go. 2 weeks passed and I'm all out of birthday cards again. For my today's video, I pulled out an older stamp set from Simon called Big Birthday Greetings. This one is one of my favorites. I've had it in my stash for a very long time, ever since it was first released. And I keep coming back to this set just because it is so versatile. I've even lost some of the stamps from here. That's how often I use this set, and I'm very sad that I have lost them, especially the little sentiments, as this set is really super versatile and very cool for birthday cards. So the main image I'm using today is the candle. This stamp set also has a set of coordinating dies, and there is a die to die cut that candle out. So the idea that I have for this card, I want to have a bunch of colorful candles, basically have a candle background, and just add a super simple birthday sentiment. I'm going to heat emboss all of my candles in the Simon Says Stamp Antique Gold Embossing Powder, and I'm doing all the usual things we do when it comes to heat embossing. The paper I'm using, and these are just scraps that I have saved from previous projects, but all of these are scraps of the Simon Says Stamp 130-pound cardstock. I love this paper for pretty much anything, especially for alcohol marker coloring, and also for any sort of die cutting. If I know that I'm stamping something, coloring, and then cutting it out using a coordinating die, I try to use this paper or the Simon Says Stamp 120-pound cardstock, which is a little bit thinner, but still just as good. It's, very thick and sturdy. And once I do my die cutting, I have very nice and durable die cuts. So I stamped the candles in clear embossing ink. I did treat my paper with anti-static powder, and I just stamped a bunch of candles. I did not really know how many I would need. I was first planning to make an A2 card, but I later changed the design to a mini slimline as that worked better for the candle size that I was using. So what I'm trying to say is I stamped and heat embossed a bunch of candles. I don't have the exact number for you guys. I just did a bunch. I used the Antique Gold embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. I did try using the white embossing powder for, a nice white on white, but that was not the brightest idea as alcohol markers color over white embossing powder. So don't do that. If you want to heat emboss your candles in white, what you can do, maybe use a different coloring medium, maybe use watercolors. Don't do alcohol markers over white embossing powder. Next, I used a pencil eraser and I erased the leftover anti-static powder from the paper. You don't see it there, but it's there. And I don't usually do this, but when I do it, I feel the tips of my markers work better. I don't know how to explain it. If there's no residue on the paper, when I color with my marker, I'm not coloring over any residue. I'm just coloring over the cardstock. So I've now started to erase the leftover anti-static powder from my paper before I start coloring my paper. Okay, as for the coloring medium, today I'm using Olo markers. These are new to me. They are relatively new to the market. And so far, I have been very pleased with them. I have already picked several colors and several shades to color my candles, and you can see my little chart off to the side here. Now, I do have one Copic marker here, the Y35, and I'm combining it with the Olo markers. And by the way, what's fantastic about these, both of these are alcohol markers, so you can combine Copics and Olos. In fact, if you have a decent sized Copic marker collection, you can use Olo markers to fill in any color gaps that you might have. Here, I'm doing the opposite. I'm using a Copic marker to fill the yellow gap that I have with my Olos. So let's get some coloring done. Coloring over embossing powder is always tricky. You don't want to do a lot of blending. In fact, it is best to do no blending over the embossing powder as the alcohol might dissolve it. So when it comes to coloring over embossing powder, best to do minimal blending. Here I've started with my darkest color. I added just dots of color on the left-hand side of my candle. This is the side that is going to be the darker and the other side will be the lighter side. I then used my medium pink and I added medium pink dots. I'm not blending anything here. I try not to go over the embossing powder, so I'm not drawing a line. I mean, it would be easier to just draw a vertical line. I'm just trying to add color inside each of those little sections. So I basically just dot the color in the section. Now, Olo markers are very juicy, very juicy. This one color in particular likes to bleed, and you can see I lift my marker up, I flip it upside down to prevent it from bleeding. And I can see that the marker is about to bleed by how wet the tip gets. Sometimes I catch it in time. Other times I do not, like here. It did bleed on me, so I have a big blob of color, but that's okay. It is fixable. It's not the end of the world. It is also worth to point out that my Olo markers are brand new. I've only had them for about a month. And I've only colored using them a handful of times. So my markers still have a ton of ink in them and they're very, very juicy. I do like that. I don't mind the occasional bleeding. Happens with my Copic markers too if I overfill them. So that's not a big deal. To finish the candle, I used the lightest pink and I did very minimal blending here. Next, I used my Copic Y35 and an Olo marker in Y1.2 to color the flame of the candle. I kept on coloring in this exact manner to create a bunch of colorful candles for my card. The next one was orange, and here I used the 3 shades once again, going from dark to medium to light. Now, Olo markers aren't like Copics in terms of the marker design. They have 2 colors on one marker. So one end is one color, and the other end is another color. I really like this about the Olos. I don't have to have as many markers in my stash to have this many colors. I can also customize my markers. For example, I like to blend this orange, the O 2.4, with the other orange, OR 2.5. So I have these 2 colors on one marker, and I just flip the marker as I color to go from one color to another. So each marker has 3 parts, 2 color parts, and a connector in the middle that connects to whichever colors you want. So you can build your own custom combinations. If you don't want to do this, if you want each marker to be one single color, there are handles available that you can buy and attach to your markers instead of adding a second color on the other end. I was tempted to do this at first, but the more I use my Olos, the more comfortable I am with having 2 colors on one marker. Now, I don't have the chisel nib here. I just have the brush nib, but personally, I never really use chisel nibs. I typically color with a brush nib, so that's not an issue for me. Overall, I'm very pleased with Olos. I will tell you that I was very skeptical. I am that kind of person. I do get skeptical about new things, and I was super skeptical about Olos because I love my Copics, and I didn't think that I would like any other marker as much as I love Copics, but I do. These are as good as Copic markers. They are a lot more affordable, and I like the concept of being able to screw 2 colors onto one marker so that I can potentially group my colors to make it easier to blend. With the coloring done, I cut the candles apart using scissors, and then I used the coordinating die to cut each of the candles out. Now, at this point, I started testing the layout of the candles that I wanted to have on my card, and I realized that an A2 card wouldn't really work here as the candles were just a little bit too tall to have 2 rows of candles. So I needed to switch to a taller card, and I switched to a mini slimline. The mini slimline cards measure 3 1/4 by 6 1/4 inches. So here I cut a white cardstock panel to 3 by 6 inches. And my plan was to have 2 rows of colorful candles with a tiny happy birthday sentiment in the center a little bit to the right. I used a sheet of press and seal. I finally managed to ship some here to Ukraine, so I'm a happy crafter because this stuff is amazing for crafting. So I put a layer of press and seal to keep all of my candles connected, and I then moved them out of the way and stamped the happy birthday sentiment using my Mini Misty stamping tool and the VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now, I wanted to pop the candles up on my card. I didn't have any of the foam adhesive strips. They would have worked perfectly here, but I didn't have any on hand, so I needed to improvise. Instead, I cut thin strips of white fun foam, and then I just used my barely art glue and adhered the strips onto the back of the candles. And I also added a tiny piece of white fun foam behind the flame part of the candles. Then I just added glue to the fun foam, picked up my press and seal sheet, positioned it over my panel, and pressed it down all at once. And oh my goodness, that was so very easy to do. I don't know how I managed to craft without press and seal before. Now, if you still don't use it, I cannot recommend it enough. You really need to get some for your craft room. It is an amazing product. Next, I created a mini slimline card base. So it measures 3 1/4 by 6 1/4 inches. And I cut a piece of white fun foam slightly smaller than my candle panel. And I adhered the fun foam behind the panel and then adhered that onto the card. So this gave me a little bit of dimension because I do not ever do flat cards. I need to have dimension on my projects, so I tend to pop things up a lot. Now, I wanted to add something else to the background here, maybe some confetti or scatter something. So I added the black gems from Spellbinders and I scattered them here and there, adding movement and interest to this background. The black color gems worked really well here as they coordinated with the black stamped sentiment. I still had some candles left, so I decided I needed to create another card, another mini slimline. Here, I used a big sentiment from the same Big Birthday Greetings stamp set. I stamped my sentiment in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I also stamped a mini sentiment at the top. It reads, "Time to eat cake." And I filled the space between the two sentiments using my leftover candle die cuts. Now, this panel was cut even smaller, so 2 3/4 inches by 5 3/4 inches. And the panel was also foam mounted onto a slimline card base. So here's a look at both cards. I love the way they turned out. I feel pumped to go ahead and stamp and color a bunch more candles and make a bunch more birthday cards. And I hope you feel the same after watching this video. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you like these ideas. If you make a card inspired by my video, we'd love it if you shared your project online and tagged us on social media. We always enjoy seeing what you make. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.